Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're working on our Pox Walkers. These guys are going to look so good on the field. I am completely stoked in getting them all painted up. So, look at all, like, the detail is going to be nuts. So we've got tentacles, we've got the flesh, we've got these cool kind of work overalls, we've got wrenches that are all going to be rusted up. So really looking forward to seeing these guys painted up. And I cannot wait to get into this project. It's been a little while since we started with the Death Guard thing, but I'm really stoked in seeing them all finished up. So, they're all based up, and now we're going to start with the priming. Okay, we got our guys all primed up in CORAX white, and I've arranged them into pairs. Now, there's only 10 unique sculpts, and everything else is a duplicate, so they come in pairs, which is fine. And actually, it's not a bad rate of duplication when you really think about it. And there's so much originality in here. Now, the one side effect is usually I would like rotate ahead or something like that, but most of the sculpts were pretty static, and so you have to do a big pile of cutting and all that to kind of change the way they're all set up. But like I said, the duplication is you know, one for every like, you know, there's kind of half of them are duplicated. That's not too bad. So in a unit of 20 guys, you'll get 2 duplicates. And I mean, you get a big monster horde of them, it might be a little bit different, but you could always supplement them with just regular zombies as well. So anyway, so I've got these guys, like I said, sorted into pairs, and I'm going to start with just kind of painting 10 of them for the video, but of course I'll be carrying it across as we go. And then I'll take a little bit of time and I'll show you how I'm kind of alternating their clothes so that it's a little bit different. Some of the guys that are pretty much just kind of naked except for the one little tabard there, then obviously there's not going to be a whole lot of variety for those guys. But that's not, like I said, it's not too bad. So let's get going. Okay, first things first, we're going to take a little bit of thin down NURGLING green, and we're just going to go over all of the skin of our Pox Walker. So fairly straight up. Make sure your coat's nice and thin. You can thin your paints down with a couple drops of water, or you can set them out onto a palette and put a bit of water and mix it in there. Or for me, sometimes I just touch the brush. I'll clean the brush in water, and then I'll touch the brush back to back into the paint and go from there. But I mean, however you want to do it, I think for me the best way is just tossing it onto a palette and thinning it out with a little bit of water that way. Alright, so I'll work my way through doing all the flesh bits in NURGLING green. Okay, so with the skin all Nurglified up, we're going to do the pants in Troll Slayer orange, or any kind of the work outfits. Now, I looked a little bit at the different models, and it all looks like they came right off of some kind of maintenance crew. So I'm actually going to follow that up with the Troll Slayer orange, and I think it looked really kind of cool and sharp and pop on the battlefield. You'll see, let's see if the camera focuses in here, you'll see that this guy's got kind of the reinforced knees of like a really kind of, you know, strong PPE kind of work pant. And so I'm going to do that with that color. And then the big guy here in his kind of overalls, I'll do that with the overalls as well, being super careful not to go over any of the strapping, so any of the suspenders, anything like that. Okay, so we got the orange all finished up, and you can see it really comes out as nice and bright and bold, and they'll stand out as kind of a unique feature on the field against the rest of the Death Guard. And I think that's going to be the biggest challenge with these guys, is making sure that they kind of pop out. Obviously, you've got you know, other zombie models if you're putting them in. You've got your plague bearers, your nurglings, and they're all going to be painted in a very similar fashion. So you want to make sure that you really kind of popping certain units out, giving them a little bit of visual distinction on the field. So the orange, I think, is really going to do that well for us. Next up, we're going to use our lead belcher, and I'm just going to go over all the metallic kind of joins in the weapons and you know, the actual weapons themselves. Let's start off with kind of an easy one here. So in this one, I'm going to do it mostly as a wooden piece, but this joining piece in the back here is going to be metallic, and of course all the big kind of nails are going to be metallic as well. So I'll finish that guy off. Anything with a big kind of pipe or rod here, I'll paint that all in metallic all the way through. Maybe I'll do kind of brass bands on the flamer, old school flamer unit here. I'll do the brass bands on that just to give it a little bit of visual pop. But of course all the bolts will be in the silver or the lead belcher as well. I'll work around on those guys. This guy's actually got lots of visual interest here because there's metallic pretty much everywhere. It's a bare bones wrench that he's got. I'm going to do red in here just to make that little bit of a weapon head pop. I don't know if it's exactly how things would get painted in real life, but I want to make sure that I get, again, that little bit of contrast. I think that's going to be a little bit more important. And we are talking about zombie creatures that were formerly human workers, so realism, you know, not always such a serious thing. I'll get all of his little clips here and there, which will look sweet. And then there are some pretty easy ones where it's literally just, well, it's literally just the guts of a weapon. So I'll do all his, the blade on here, the rod that's holding it all together, the magazine kind of container in here. I'll do the big hammerhead on this guy as well. And then of course some of the details here on his respirator. Those will get done in the lead belcher as well. And then of course there's a few subtle details on each of the bits of suspender or webbing or belting or anything like that. Anywhere there's an intersection, I'm going to put a little metal buckle. And things like the bottom of the tank and on the back, this little valve here. And like the Death Guard models, I mean, they really, like the Death Guard, like the Plague Marine models, they really did a great job of having detail, like lots of detail, but it's all kind of precise detail. It's not kind of over-greebled or anything like that. It literally is just... It's like they've done a great job with the economy of it, and it literally, you've just got just enough detail to really make things stand out, but still look like there's lots going on. Really, really good job artistically, I think. So I'll just finish up with all of the lead belcher on all these metallic bits, and we'll be right back. So I've gone through and done all of the metallic pieces in lead belcher, all the stuff that's going to end up being some form of silver. And I wanted to mention a few things as I was kind of trucking along. This guy here, I did his goggles. As you can see, we'll let the camera focus. I just did the framework of the goggles. Of course, I did the respirator and all that as well. And then on the two guys with these big coats, just for a bit of variety to mix it up, I'm going to do one like a commissar. So I'm going to give him a darker coat and gold buttons or clips. And this guy here is going to be like a kind of a lab coat type dude. So I'm going to leave his jacket, his coat or whatever, I'm going to leave that in white. And I just put the silver clips, the lead belcher on him, and this guy I'm going to leave for now, and I'll do that when I do that pass with the gold. In addition to that, I did our friend here, I did his arm here, and I just did that in the lead belcher as well, and I wanted to mention that. Now, the next step I'm going to do is going to be with the MEPHISTON red, so that's going to give us all our red elements for the army, and I'll bring in this guy here. So primarily, for the most part of our guys, it's going to be their little tabard element here, and you'll see that it'll occur kind of all over. And in addition to that, with this guy right here, we're going to do his tabard, obviously, and we'll also do his armor plate up here as well. So let's get going on that. I'm going to use MEPHISTON red, and make sure you give it a good shake here. And of course the red's going to give us a lot of that kind of visceral pop. It'll tie it in with all of our other Nurgly dudes. We've got that Plague Guard, Plague Marine, Death Guard, red kind of supplementing everything. So I'll make sure that the tabards all get done in red. So work my way around, do all the tabards. Now some of them have pockets, bags, whichever on the back, and I'm just going to work around those because those are going to be done in kind of a chocolatey brown color. And then I'll do our friend's armor plating right here. So I'll do that in the red as well. And again, just adding these little shocks of color to anything that we're doing. And red is such a great kind of visceral color. It really draws your eye in. And in addition to all of that, I'm also going to be picking out some of the major weapon details here. So in the case of our wrench-toting friend, I'm just going to do the frame around kind of all the working parts of this big, huge pipe wrench. And it'll be nice because it'll add a little bit of color to the army just out across the line. But in this case here, it'll be nice because it's you know, he doesn't have a tabard or anything like that, so it'll still add that red to the model without it being kind of overwhelming. And then finally, to kind of keep consistency with the rest of the army, we're just going to have all of these tanks that we have. We're going to pop them in red as well. Good for like an emergency oxygen-y type thing if it was sitting on a wall. And in this case here, all the tanks will pop the detail as well because these guys don't have tabards. So yeah, so we'll just tie everything together. Alright, so with all that red on there, it's really starting to pop the models a little bit. We've got a few more items of color to kind of pop things out. We're going to be doing the bone and of course the purple tentacles and then kind of the rich browns for the leather work and all that stuff. So continuing on here, we're going to start working on our bone elements for all of our different Pox Walkers. Okay, so with this guy, I chose him as kind of the example because he's got lots of tentacly type elements in there and lots of bone elements mixed in as well. And the designers were pretty smart in the sense that they, anything that's going to be a kind of bone element has got kind of a lengthwise kind of groove in it to show that it's a bone. And anything tentacly is going to have these kind of sideways ribs here as we go. So what we're going to do is we're just going to work on now the different bone elements of our friends here, and simply just adding in a little bit of Screaming Skull and going in and painting our different bone elements. Now it's going to be very similar in terms of color, but the wash will make that separation, and we'll take steps to separate that out as well. And it'll be looking really good. With all the bone done, we're going to do these wraps here around the feet as well. So these cloth wraps, some of the walkers will have these cloth wraps around their feet. So I'm going to do that with Screaming Skull. I've also done this on my my Sigmar zombies so that I can kind of supplement back and forth a little bit if I needed to. But in general, we're just going to do those wraps at the bottom in Screaming Skull as well. And then lastly, my Commissar coat, so not my lab coat, but my Commissar coat, I'm going to do the Screaming Skull on the inside to tie it in with my Astra Militarum Commissars. And he's going to get like a deep, dark, kind of chocolatey brown outside for that kind of dark leather. But the inside of the coat is going to be done in Screaming Skull. Okay, we can see now that we've got all the bone-colored features all done. So the bone elements themselves, the cloth, the inside of the capes and jackets and things like that. And we can see that we're actually filling in our colors pretty well here. The next thing that we're going to use is Dryad bark. And we're going to go after a couple of different elements in here. First off, we're going to be going for anything that has kind of a wooden feature to it. So that would include any of the handles of our kind of improvised weapons here. In addition to that, anything that's a carapace. Now on this guy, he's got that kind of fly carapace. So I'm going to do that in the Dryad bark here. And in addition to that, we're going to be doing all of the leather boots. Anything that would essentially be a black leather boot or a black rubber boot, we're going to do in this Dryad bark. So it's not going to be a perfect black, but it'll be in the same tonal range as everything else. And it's a really kind of neat looking effect that we'll get there. So we'll do the boots here in Dryad bark. And in addition to that, we've got two types of foot coverings here. This dude's got his boot, you know, the main part of the boot, the kind of rubbery part. And then he's got these gaiters that are on there as well. And those gaiters are actually going to be kind of a lighter color of brown. And it'll be the same color as all of the other pouches and belts and all, what have you. We're also going to be doing the Commissar's coat here. The former Commissar's coat. So I'll be doing all of that, being careful not to get the piping and the clasps there too much. But I'll work my way around on our Commissar friend's coat. And anything to do with wooden handles, we're also going to do with the Dryad bark. And of course our big wooden mallet, which I think is absolutely hilarious. Very Harley Quinn. All right, I'll continue along with this, making sure I get all the wooden elements, the boots that are not part of the gaiters, and any of the carapace features as well. All right, so next up we're going to be working on our leathery type products. So the gaiters that are down here, the pouches, strapping, the respirator masks, all of that stuff. We're going to be working with Steel Legion DRAB and just paying close attention to all these little finer kind of details. So it's some of the last details we have to do. So I'll start off here with the gaiters, and if you had it on a shoe, for example, you'd want that done in kind of a leathery finish as well. So we'll work on all the gaiters. We'll also work on all the pouches, the holsters, the strapping. So any of the belts that are here, we'll do that. Any of the pouches, we'll do those. Obviously, the holster we'll do in the Steel Legion DRAB as well. And in addition to that, I want to do the respirator, just that kind of breathing piece that goes over the mouth and nose. I want to do that in that kind of leathery finish as well. In addition to that, we'll be working on all these little straps on our friend with the wrench here. All these kind of suspendery type straps holding all these clips on. And I think it'll give us lots of contrast and pop and really make it a really neat feature of this, this model in particular. So I'm going to continue my way through. Obviously there's loads to do here. The other one that I want to make a mention of as well is just this little tiny kind of cable or hose on the back here that reads off to the pressure gauge. So just wanted to make special note of that, and I'm sure there'll be more as I go. All right, I'll continue on and back in a bit. All right, so we got all the leathery trim type stuff done, and now we're working on the tentacles themselves, and they're going to be this bright purple, same thing as we've done with our Death Guard Plague Marines. We're now going to do with these guys as well. So we're going to base this off with NAGGAROTH Night, and it's a nice rich deep purple, and I also like the fact that it's such a solid base that it covers really well, but that white primer underneath makes all the difference in the world. So all I'm going to do is find that point where the tentacles meet the skin, and I'm going to base it in here and just go over all of our different tentacle pieces. Now there's loads of these around the models, which is awesome, so it gives lots of depth and personality, and it'll really kind of add some contrast on the model now between the reds, the purples, and the greens. Now they're all complementary colors, which is fantastic. So we get lots of depth, but they're still going to be nice and bright. So we can see here that some of these guys were really tentacly, but that purple on the white, the NAGGAROTH Knight, has such a really nice kind of delivery on it. You get lots and lots of brightness coming through, but the recesses are nice and dark, which is fantastic. So I'm just going to move on. Just one side note, I did end up, by the time I got all the tentacles filled out in the bellies of these two guys here, I went in with a little bit more of MEPHISTON red just to kind of tidy them up so they're a little gory on the inside, but they don't have a lot of exposed guts compared to, say, the Plague Bearers. So my next step here is going to be kind of finishing off the metallics. I'm going to use RETRIBUTOR armor. I want something really nice and bright because we're going to leave the guys kind of streaky and dirty and gross. So I'm going to want things a little bit brighter as we go along. Now, some of the stuff is going to be pretty easy to do. Obviously, the flamer. Get that in the camera there. Obviously, the flamer kind of cowling here is still going to be a nice kind of characterful piece, and something that wraps around the pipes. I'm just going to do just a gentle, careful line around the piping here on both sides, just so it looks like these bands, and it just gives it just a little tiny bit of extra, little pop or character there, which is nice. In addition to that, I'll be doing the buckles on our commissar, our former commissar's jacket here. So I'm going to do the buckles here, and just to kind of contrast against that brown, I think that'll look pretty sweet. I'm going to do it up here as well. Just get these little tabs like this. And I'll also do the gold piping on the jacket here as well. So very carefully, just using the side of my brush, I'm just going to just touch the edge. Now, if I mess this up, and you can see that I've gone over a little bit, you can see I've got to touch up with the brown a little bit more here, the DRYAD bark, but I am just going to kind of just touch up the piping here, and then when I touch up the jacket at the end, I'll catch it then as well. So I'll do the piping here. Oh, totally blowing that one up. Okay, nice. And then all of the little fetishes and these guys here, all the little fetishes, the bells, the little fly symbols, all of that, I'll tidy those up with the gold, with the RETRIBUTOR armor. Okay, and so you can see it's nicely coming together now. And once we wash it, it's going to pop all that detail out, which will be great. As far as these guys go, again, it'll just be fetishes here. This guy with his open belly's got kind of an interesting one, so I'm going to give him some gold thread on his fetish here, and he'll have his Nurgle symbol. That'll be all in gold as well. So just those threads there and all of that. And then finally our friend here just touching up his little bit of a fetish here and what have you. Perfect. All right, so I'll continue along, and as I'm going along, I'm also tidying up a whole bunch of other things as well. You'll see that I've got, for example, I've missed the buckle up here and all that. So now that I've got most of the base colors down, I'm going to just do a quick review over all my guys and make sure that I've got everything. And the nice thing about starting with white is you can see always the parts that you haven't quite finished off yet. So I'll finish everything off, and then we'll come back. We got one more thing to do. It'll be the teeth, the eyes, and all the maggots with white. And then I'll just do a tidy up, and we're good to wash. Okay, so we've got all the decorations done. I did a dummy check on all the metallics, all the leather bits, and I just touched up a ton while we were kind of going around. Little spots you kind of miss when you turn the model upside down. You discover additional tentacles, things like that. So it's a constant iterative process. It's never perfect. So as you're painting, you just keep catching detail as you go. Speaking of detail, the last piece we're going to do now is our white scar. And we're just going to work on just a few little tiny details, literally. The first of which is going to be that wonderful smile that these guys have. So I'm just going to brush this over their teeth. Okay, and then I'll do their eyes as well, because they're going to have those kind of pale eyes. I'll do the little maggots on their bodies, and they're kind of all over the place. There's not as many as I thought there would be, but there's quite a few, so Gonna do little maggots everywhere. And yeah, I think it'll look pretty sweet. Inside the goggles, I'm also going to do white just as a consistency thing. A little bit of work in there, but the wash will kind of take care of that. And I can always come back later with some additional wash or what have you. But I'll go around, I'll be picking out the teeth, the maggots, I'll be picking out the eyeballs, and we should be good to go wash-wise. Okay, so I've gone through and I've just done kind of a dummy check on all the colors, make sure I got everything, tried to find all the little maggots and the nails and all that fun stuff that goes along with. And right now, as it stands, they're looking pretty decent. Don't get me wrong, they look like they were painted by a paint-by-numbers, you know, kind of 3-year-old put them together. But once we put the wash down, it's going to add tons of depth and character to these guys. So really stoked about seeing how they turn out once they're washed. It's kind of my favorite part of the whole process. You can see here that we've got lots of color variation, lots of balance in color, so it looks really, really good. The red pops, but it's not overwhelming. The purple tentacles, again, not overwhelming. Really liking the way it's all come together. So quite pleased so far. And also, oh, by the way, I finished off the bases just because I like to wash the bases and get that same kind of depth on the bases. So I got those all ready to go. And now I'm just going to start off with the wash phase. Now, the wash I use is a custom wash. It is 25% Agrax Earthshade, 25% Nuln Oil, and 50% just regular cheapy buy anywhere floor wax. And the floor wax adds as an awesome flow aid. The brown gives us a little bit of kind of depth of color, but the black makes things look just a little bit dirtier where we want it to be. And the net result is it's a really good wash for our guys. Now, what I like about it is that it flows right into all the cracks, and it really brings out the detail pretty much right away, and it really gets in those cracks. So what I'm going to do now is I'll continue on washing the rest of our guys. I'll make sure that there's not too much pooling in certain spots, and then once it's applied to all of our dudes, we'll come back and we'll start reapplying the colors. So I'm probably going to let this sit for about an hour or so. Just make sure that things are all nice and dry. I'll do our bases in here, and yeah, looking good. Okay, so the wash is all done. Let it sit for a good long time, and really liking, of course, the way it comes out. The wash always brings out kind of all the hidden details and the models that you're missing before, all the little little poxes and bubbles and all these little kind of gross little details that come out and really make the Nurgle models really kind of stand out. So just want to take a quick time out to see how it looked with all our guys all washed up here. Now obviously we're going to need to go back in and rebase all of the colors, but oh man, looking really solid. You're loving the way the metallics kind of get kind of damped down, but you still get little hints of brightness in there, but lots of kind of dirty damp down of the sheen on the metallics there. The white's nice and gross, so that when we go back in and we highlight it, we pick out the higher edges of it. We still got that low light to everything in there. The chocolate brown on the Commissar's coat here, that Dryad bark has really come out nicely. And of course all the orange is now kind of dirty as opposed to super bright that we used for the pants. Alright, so I'm going to clear these guys away, set up for painting here, and we're going to start basing with our flesh right away, and we're off to the races, kind of the last half of the process. And now we're going to start working on the skin tones again with the Nurgling green. Now you'll notice I picked this guy just because of all the little bits of detail in there. You can see there's actually, when that wash hits, it sinks into all the recesses there, and you can actually see these little raised areas. And I'm just going to kind of bump up the color in those raised areas and essentially just amplify the effect of the wash. So wherever it's been kind of tamped down, we're just going to go back in and pick out the major highlights here of the flesh on our Pox Walker here. So even looking at the arms, it's called overbrushing, but so it's like a wet dry brush, I guess, but go figure, but it's an overbrush. And we're just going to pick out all of those details that have humped up or been popped up by the wash, and just get those really high points and pick them all out. So all the big blisters and, you know, the shoulder blades, even going in here and going after the brow, kind of the nose and the cheekbones and the chin. All right, so I'm just going to work my way around, again picking out all the major highlights, but leaving all that depth in there that we had before. It's also good if you want to have it look kind of dirty, you can always kind of streak it up just a little bit. So on the larger surfaces like the stomach here, you can just give it a little bit of a streak there. And yeah, so we're just going to work my way through. Now there's lots of flesh on here and clearly loads of detail. So I'm just going to pick out all the major high areas and try and leave, again, as much of that detail as I can in the background there. All right, so with that initial bout of Nurgling green back over top, you can see it's really accentuating the depth that the wash brought out. Lots and lots of detail being brought to the surface. And of course, all we're doing with the highlights now is going to amplify that tone on the flesh there. So I'm going to use Screaming Skull here. And I'm just going to do two things, actually. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go after all the extreme highlights here on the flesh itself. So specifically going after the blisters, just kind of extending and drawing that color out. And then just doing like a little bit of an edge highlight, picking out like just the extreme edges of the musculature, the arms, the fingers, and especially on the face. So we'll just do the chest a little bit here, but just on the face specifically, the nose, the chin, just kind of the forehead, the brow there, right? So just making sure that I go after all those extreme details, the ear, you know, the cheeks, the chin, all that. And then on top of that, kind of a non-standardy type thing to do, but we're going to go after all the bone elements as well. So all these spikes, we're going to go focusing kind of on the top 2/3 or the last 2/3 of the point, so we get that nice colored kind of gradation down. We go from the light down to a little bit of the darker washed bone, and then the detail in there as well. So just going in and picking out those kind of highlights, the extreme highlights, well, not the extreme, but kind of the over highlights of the bone pieces here, these kind of jutting out spikes. But leaving all that detail down below there. All right, as I'm trucking along here, I just wanted to make note of a couple other things. We're still working on our Screaming Skull. However, I just wanted to make note of just a few spots that we want to make sure that we don't forget about as we go along. First spot is going to be this guy here with the tank and the large overalls. This is in bleached, in that kind of bony kind of color. So I'm just going to use Screaming Skull on this to pick out the majors and restore a little bit of that fabric in there. We're going to have these wraps around the legs here, and we're just going to pick out just kind of the majors. Just a quick swipe here on each of the bands. And don't forget, we're going to be coming back in with a pen. But just kind of giving a little bit of pop to the bands there, so that'll be back and front. A couple guys will be getting that treatment as well. Another thing that we don't really want to forget about is the insides of our coats, both the Commissar coat and our lab coat here. We're just going to just give it kind of a streaky kind of highlight here on all the majors, just so that it looks like it was a different color to begin with. So the skin and those Screaming Skull, that bone-colored highlight is all done. Lots and lots of pop, lots of kind of visual attention grabbing to all the details. Really, really sweet. Now, I'm going to pause on the skin for now, and I'll be coming back to that in a second. We'll do the maggots and the blisters and all that, and maybe a little bit of re-inking there as well. But for now, I'm going to work on the Troll Slayer Orange, and I'm just going to work on their kind of work pants and their PPE gear and their survival gear and all that. And I'm just going to take Troll Slayer Orange, and it's the only highlight I'm going to do, but I'll do it over top of the existing washed version of this. So again, just going to go grab kind of the general highlights on the pants, and I'm just going to go in over top and add a little punch of color onto those uniforms, the pants, all that other stuff. And just picking the major highlights again, leaving all the low-lighted wash in there as well. And playing with the orange is really nice. It really brings out some life on the table. And again, I think the challenge with Nurgle always is fighting that blandness, that kind of washed out kind of look and feel there. So this really does add a lot of visual interest to the model. All right, I'll carry this through with the rest of the models, and then we'll move on to the reds. All right, so we've got the orange popping quite nicely here against the kind of the green and the bone color, the Screaming Skull. And now we're going to work on the other bold color on the model, which is going to be the reds. And we're going to go back in with MEPHISTON red now. And we're just going to cover all the major highlights of the reds. And then we'll do an edge highlight in the next step here. So obviously we can start with the armor plating here, and we're just going to go through and just do all, like I said, the major highlights, leaving some of that, the tonal difference there from all the wash. And there's some spots where it's going to be rather chewed up, so I might just touch in there super quick. I can always go back in with the wash after and fix it up. And we're just going to go over the major highlights here of the tabards with the MEPHISTON red, and just kind of the high level stuff on the tabards there. Next up, we'll be working on the weapons, and anything that we've done in red here, just to be kind of consistent, we'll do again with our MEPHISTON red, leaving all that low light shade that it just kind of happens naturally there. Then finally, our friend here with the oxygen tank, or the breathing tank here, just being very careful to leave that recessed shading in so it looks kind of dented and dinged up and old. I'll just work my way around, getting all that red rebuilt a little bit there. With all the red kind of pumped back up again with that MEPHISTON red, we're just going to start with an edge highlight, or I guess we're going to finish the red with an edge highlight. And we're just going to use a little bit of Wild Rider red, just because it's really nice and bright. And we're just going to touch the extreme highlights of the deep red that we've done on our models here. We're just going to do just a little bit of an edge highlight. So I'm just going to do a light line across the bottom, and then kind of flare it up a little bit here as I go. So just picking just kind of the major highlights here, just to give it a little bit of extra pop and character. So the same thing will apply with the armor plate. I'm just going to do an edge highlight around the outside edge, as decent as I can with this all potted up and mixed up here. And just pick out some of the larger elements of the surface. So I'm just trying to add a little bit of highlight to this. So I'm going to stick away from that low light. Just maybe pick out a little bit of that top panel, just to give it a little bit of extra life there. With the weapons, it's going to be the same thing. It's just going to be a straight up edge highlight, and that's going to be pretty easy. And then finally, we'll work on the tank here, and we're just going to do that, just kind of that. First off, we'll do like a ring around the outside here, wherever there's a hard edge. We'll give that the highlight there. Okay, and then going over the top, right where the light would hit it, we're just going to give it just a little bit of a nice line. So my Wild Rider red is quite thin here. Just using a little bit of water to thin it out. It's quite thin, but then it allows me just to kind of do that nice kind of blended, gradiated top to the tank there. Okay, so we got the red all finished up now, and the next step is going to be to go after the metallic elements. Now, the golds, that kind of dirty gold color, I'm actually going to keep that. I really like the way that it looks. It's like a nice kind of older brass type look to it. So I'm going to actually keep that. And for the steel, anything that was lead belcher before, I'm going to do a very light edge highlight of RUNEFANG steel. And the point behind this here is just to give a little bit of extra light to that kind of dirty look. Now, let's start with these guys here. Now, with the big pipe here, I'm just going to do just a line literally on the top of the pipe, just to give it that little bit of extra kind of glow to it. I'll just run my brush gently over the cabling here, and of course all the spikes, I'll just hit those up top as well. I won't worry so much about being underneath. I'm just trying to kind of add to the natural highlight, the natural sheen that comes off of that. Next up, we're going to do the armature here on our friend with the bionic arm, and again just picking out just the major highlights of that arm, and I'm going to leave you know, all that depth inside left over from the shadows, and just a nice gentle kind of overbrush just to add a little bit of pop to those colors. For our friend with the hammer here, again, just going to go just a very loose edge highlight around the structure of the hammer, and just giving just a little bit of extra pop or sheen visually to the hammer. And then I'll do the cabling here as well. Beautiful. And then of course our friend with the pipe wrench, I'll just go just over the majors. We're going to come back over this with some rusting a little bit later, but for now we'll just do the highlights. We've also got these great little clips everywhere, and I want to make sure that they really pop, just because it's a nice contrast against the orange, that kind of dirty orange color that we have now. Okay, so we've got the skin mostly done, we've got the metallics and the reds done. Next up we're going to be working on the wood elements, and of course the jacket of our post commissar here. We've got some carapace elements on our little fly dude over here, and in order to kind of make them sync up with all of our other Nurgly demons and all of that, anything kind of wooden we're just going to hit again with our Dryad bark, and just going over the majors again just to restore a little bit of that light back to it. We'll be highlighting it again in a second, but just to make sure we get that depth thing all sorted out. For the carapace bits, I guess is a little tricky to say, I'm going to just go in on what would be the major highlights of that, and just go in and just restore, just lighten it up just a little bit because it's being washed down. Beautiful. Okay. All of our wooden elements here, we can see that we've got some. Just going to go in and give them a little touch on kind of two of the sides. This is kind of hexagonal in terms of its body here, but just tidy things up, and if I've gone over a little bit with the silver, I can use that opportunity to tidy that up as well. So nice and sharp there. And then of course our commissar and his jacket and his big hammer here, our former commissar that is, he's been liberated by the Nurgly gubbins. So I'm just going to go in and again just use the opportunity to just tidy up a little bit in here, get rid of some of those metallics, and then on the head of the hammer as well, I'll just kind of do a streaky kind of over the body of that hammer there, just to restore a bit of that, you know, nice rich brown color back. I'm going to go over the major highlights of the jacket, very much like I would, like I did with the reds, and again using the opportunity to just tidy up any of these little spaces that have reduced down a little bit because either the wash pulled at it or what have you. But just going over all the major highlights here, just to redefine that nice break in color between the purples and the greens underneath, and just restore a lot of that richness of color back. Also with things like the tentacles that are under the jacket, I can just give them little bumps, or I can just give them just a little bit of a highlight there, just restore a little bit of that highlight to kind of illustrate that is in fact a big ribby tentacle under there. Alright, as always, I'll pass this through the rest of the batch, and we'll be back and we'll be working on the edge highlights of the Dryad bark here, but we'll also be working on filling out some of the leathery components as well. And of course, one of the things we can't forget is any of the boots that have two parts to them, where they've got the boot and the gaiter. We've chosen to go with the DRYAD bark at the kind of main part or principal part of the boot, and then we did the gaiters in Steel Legion drab. So I'm just going to touch those back up again, just going over the major highlights, and kind of if any of the base color got on the boot, we'll fix that up as well. And then on top of that, we've got our guys with essentially kind of those rubbery containment boots there, and lots of nice color gradation in here. So I'm just going to pick out the majors, much like I did with the coat on these boots here. And of course, again, if I've boned anything up, and you can see where I've got quite a bit of orange on the boot element here, I can just go back in and finish that off nicely, just fixing up any of the little mishaps we've had as we go. It's a very iterative process. You just keep kind of working your way through it, and you're always you know, fixing something one way or the other. But this way you always get nice clean lines, and it's just through just kind of working your way through and fixing problems as you see them. It doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, so with that deeper brown done in the DRYAD bark, we're now going to start working on the lighter elements. So we're going to do a couple things at once. We're going to highlight the wood and the kind of the dark leather elements of the boots and the jackets and all of that. We're also going to striate on the carapace here to give it kind of that kind of carapacey, bony, kind of scraggly kind of look to it, threaded look to it. And in addition to that, we're also going to do our overbrush on all of our bands, our leather bands here, and our pouches. So a little bit of a, you know, kind of a little bit of jack of all trades color, which is kind of cool. It fulfills many roles, but it also kind of, you know, it just kind of keeps that same tonal range altogether. So let's start working our way through. So I'm going to start off with the striation marks on the carapace here, and it's just going to be just these little thin lines just on the edges of the carapace. So just kind of mimicking you know, the style of the model with all the cracks and all of that. So I'll just give that a little touch up here, and I'll do that on the other side. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but we're just looking for these little choppy lines on the highlight there. Okay, we can also go in and just, while there's not much paint on the brush, just kind of overbrush some of the bumps in the carapace to give it a bit of extra texture. Now with the boots and the leather on the jacket, we're going to use a different approach. We're just going to go in here and just kind of just pick out almost like an edge highlight. I'll get that on the camera. Do like an edge highlight here, and a little just touch on the top where that bump is, and we'll just work our way around. Now if you do too much for whatever reason, that's absolutely fine. You can just go back in later and touch that up. So while I'm here, I'll just do the gaiters as well, and again, just an overbrush to restore kind of the major highlights on these gaiters here, just to get a chunk of that color back. But again, leaving all that recessed color in there. We'll do a final highlight on this as well. With any of the wooden elements here, any of the handles, I'm just going to draw a very thin line where the light would pick up on the handle, and just a very thin line, kind of just denoting just a little bit of highlight. And I'll do the same thing here. Now with the hammer, I'm going to do exactly what I did with the carapace, because it's kind of got this threaded, fractured, falling apart thing. I'm just going to hit the highlight on that in that way as well, just so that I get a lot of texture on that hammer, just as I did with the carapace. Just that kind of threaded, striated look there, with a little bump in the middle there and a little bump in the middle here. And when we move over to the coat, again, I'm just going to pick out all the major highlights of the coat. So I'll do a bit of an edge highlight around the coat. I'll pick up any of that incidental texture in there. So I'll edge highlight around here, where it's frayed, I'll striate just a little bit. And any of the extra bumps or what have you. So you'll see here that we've got the tentacle that's sitting just under the jacket. So I'm going to pick up all the bumps there, just so we kind of visually assist our eye in seeing that light. And then I'll do the all the bumps and major bumps and ridges with the Steel Legion DRAB. Then of course I'll go in and do any of the strapping here. I'll just pick up the major highlights with the Steel Legion DRAB. So any of the leather belting or strapping on any of these outfits here, I'll just go and set them all up. And of course I'll pick out any of the pouches. And of course I'll go around and tool up, make sure I get all of those gaiters as well. Those sneaky, sneaky gaiters. Okay, all the leather elements are all done up, and we can see that they've been base coated, so they still got a little bit of that depth in there. Majority highlights have been done, and now we're going to work on the edge highlight of all those leathery bits. One thing that I didn't mention last time round here was the fact that I did the masks as well, so I just kind of set up the masks to you know, have that nice kind of overbrush over top as well, and they'll be part of this highlight step too. So we're going to use KARAK stone, and KARAK stone is going to be our friend to just highlight all of those leather elements, and this will finish off all the browns, which is a nice touch. And yeah, so coming together really nicely. You know, the little bit of work going on with these, but not minding it too much. So just picking out again the very edge highlights of all the leathery components here. And just going to make sure that I get nice coverage over top of all of this stuff. And I'll make sure that I get all the pouches. Just these nice edge highlights on the pouches here, across the top obviously. With the strapping, you can approach it one of two ways. You can either just do, if you got pretty steady hands today, you can just do the edges of the strapping like this, okay, which looks pretty good. Or if you want, you can just do kind of like a majority highlight and just kind of do the top half. Whatever you want to do to kind of accomplish the look that you're looking for, but I'm going to try and expand my horizons here and do it underneath. So if you overdo it a little bit, you can always go back in with a little bit of the original Steel Legion DRAB, and you can just kind of paint up the middle here and do that subtractive edge highlight and restore most of that color. So you'll see here on the holster I went a little over the top, so you can just go back in with that Steel Legion DRAB and just kind of tidy up right in the middle. And sometimes it's easier to paint the larger surface than it is the actual edge itself. And I got a whole video on this, on the subtractive edge highlighting in the playlist there, but just a nice way to kind of tidy up if in fact you go over too much. Okay, so I'm going to continue on with the edge highlighting here, not forgetting things like the mask. So just a nice kind of touch on the edge here, just to give it that little bit of extra pop. Happy looking good. And then yeah, I'll work my way around and we'll get moving on the other colors, and that'll finish off our browns. Alright, so we've reached that stage where most of our base colors are done. The next one that we're going to work on is our tentacles. Now these are going to be a little bit interesting. We have a lot of tentacles with lots of ribbing on them, and some that are just basically these kind of flat tentacles here. Now with our Death Guard before, our Plague Marines, you can see that there was very clearly defined colors in the tentacles, and that they were, you know, either these nice smooth ones or they had very distinctive kind of ribbing. But in these guys' case, they've got a little bit of a different, it's kind of like the segments of a worm type thing. So it's going to be a little tricky. So we're going to apply the paint in two different ways. On the smooth parts, we're going to apply it, you know, very much like we did with our Plague Marines. And when it is ribbed like this, we're just going to use a very light dry brush. So let's start with XEREUS Purple. And I'm just going to start with the plain brush routine first, and then we'll go from there. So grabbing a little bit of thin down XEREUS Purple, I'm going to go in here now and just pick out the majors of you know, kind of the high points of the tentacles that are smoother. And that'll be the ones inside the guts here. We'll have those guys there. And you could go through and you could just kind of striate as you went, right? And that'd be okay. But that'd be a little bit of work there. So what I'm going to do instead, because we have such a high volume, is I'm going to grab a piece of tissue paper here, and then I'm going to get this super old ratty brush that I have here, and literally just going to dip my brush in my paint. Clearly not going to thin the paint out now, so I've got a little bit of paint on the end there. That might even be a bit too much. And then I'm going to grab my tissue paper here, and I'm just going to, you'll see that it's like painting. And then as I go, I'm just pulling the paint off until there's not much left on there. And then I'll go and I'll hit up the ridge lines on our tentacles. And what's going to happen is it's just going to pick up the high points there of those tentacles. All right, perfect. So I'll continue along with those two methods of both painting. I'll sample a little bit up here again and hit it again. I'm going to go over the two methods there, both of painting and dry brushing on top of these tentacles here. And of course being careful as always not to get the paint on the existing work we've done. And then we'll go through and we'll grab Genestealer Purple, and we're just going to finish off essentially what we started with the tentacles, only this time we're going to be picking out the higher, much kind of higher highlights, the strongest kind of highlights. So if you see any bumps or anything like that, we just touch that with the Genestealer Purple. Maybe run just a thin line on the extreme highlights here. And you can also do them down to the end. Okay, just to give it a little bit of extra personality here. And then on top of that, you can go in and we'll do the dry brush thing again. So I'll bring out our paper. I'll do the Genestealer Purple. I'll just grab a little bit, just about that much off of the paint pot there. And then we'll do the exact same thing. So again, looks like I'm going to be painting here for a bit, but very quickly it starts to run out. And you just want a little bit coming off. And then I'll go in here and then I will just do kind of the very top highlights. So a very light dry brush on top with the Genestealer Purple. And of course I'll carry this all the way through. So one of the coolest finishing touches for the army is the white. And we're going to use white scarf for this now. And first off, we're going to go over the coat because it's going to be our lab coat and all of that. So I'll just take some white scar, super thin down, and I'm just going to start streaking until I kind of get the effect that I'm looking for. So fairly straight up, just working our way down, doing the streaking, getting lots of color on there, but still leaving it kinda dirty. I was going to take a bunch of thin coats, but I'll be restoring that white to the coat. But I still want it to look kind of grubby and dirty, like it's been dragged around and was used to be white, was formerly white, but now it's just this dirty, grimy smock. So as I'm trucking along with this back piece here, with the ribbing of the tentacle underneath, I'm just going to go in and I'll make sure that I do an extra second layer, and I'll just build it up on each of those ridges to kind of make it look so it's even a little bit more highlighted in that kind of gray white coat there. All right. So I'll just build this up in a couple layers, keep it nice and streaky, but I also want to make mention of the little maggots and larvae everywhere. I'm just going to do just an overbrush, a very gentle overbrush over all of the maggots. So I don't want to flood it with paint. I just want to make sure that I'm just getting just that little bit of overbrush in there as well. Now if I overdo it, if I overdo the overbrush, go figure, I can just go in with a little bit of wash and tidy that up. So I'll work on those elements, and then finally, with our actual Pox Walkers themselves, I'm going to go in and I'm going to pick out all of these blistering pustules. So none of the exploded ones here, but anything that pops out, I'm just going to touch and throw a bit of white on there. So it looks like this pussy, you know, just about to explode and boil out all the corruption and grossness and all that. Okay. So I'll just take my time and work my way around. But this is going to add a ton of character to the army. Alright, so I'll just get a little bit more here. And I think this is the thing that really kind of sells it, is this white, these white kind of pustules that are popping out and gross. And it just adds such a nice contrast to the green and the bone and all of that. So I'm going to work my way around and make sure that I catch all of them. Okay, with the painting elements done, I'm going to add a final bit of pop, and I'm going to use my MICRON 005 black pen. These things are invaluable, they're awesome. And with this one here, all I'm going to do is I'm going to go after wherever two colors meet. So let's say here, and we're just going to add a little bit of definition here. Okay, into our collar, and then kind of around our pieces here. So wherever two colors meet, or if you have a texture that shifts somewhere. So in the case of the back here, we've got a texture. So I'm just going to trace that line down the back just to give it a little bit more definition. Things like the tentacles here, I'll just do a quick outline around that to make it pop out. Of course, the two colors meet here, the texture and the colors of the coat in the back there. Even on the metallics, I'm going to go after the sledgehammer here and just go after the separations that are right here. And you'll see it just makes it all kind of pop out, very cell shaded for sure. Really going to be important with things like the straps against the orange here. So I'll just take that and I'll just do our black line inside of that. And all it does is really give your eye some guidance as to what to look for to make out those shapes. Beautiful. Okay, so wherever two textures meet, or wherever two colors meet, that is where we're going to do our black line around. And if we look at some of the blisters and all of that, we can see it really adds the pop of that blister. No pun intended. It really adds the pop on those blisters to really make them kind of stand out. And up close it looks nice, but from afar, your eye really trains in on it. Whenever we have a meeting of flesh and bone, because the colors are so similar, what we can do is we can just highlight those two textures meeting each other. Everything from goggles, you name it. So I'm just going to go around and I'm going to pick out all of these different pieces. Alright, so I finished off all the bases and they are all complete. Looking really good. Lots of work on these guys, I think, especially for kind of a battle line type unit. But there was so much detail on these models, and there's so much visual interest in here that definitely worthwhile. Loving all the way the faces all came out. The faces were a little small to kind of capture a big pile of detail. However, you know, with a little bit of washing and, you know, just being careful with your painting and all that, the faces really come out awesome. The colors, the golds, and the kind of metallic-y parts looking really good as well. We're going to be rusting up a big chunk of these in a future video here, which is fantastic. We've got the different coats, the former commissar, and of course the lab technician, so we can mix it up a little bit that way. And you know, the fact is that there's only a duplicate pose once for each 20 guys. So that's pretty good. So 10 unique models is pretty darn awesome. So just want to say thanks a lot for watching this one. Hope it was of value. This was a lot of fun and a huge achievement, kind of getting them all done together, which is great. And if you liked the video, obviously, please hit that like button. It really helps get the channel out there, gets the videos out there, and obviously, someone else's recommendation is always the best. If you want more videos just like this, slap that subscribe button. There's a little bell right beside it as well. Make sure you hit that, and you'll get notifications on all your devices about new videos coming out for the channel. So, thanks a lot for watching, guys. We'll catch you in the next video.